So today we're going to review solving one-step equations with decimals by adding and subtracting. Start with the problem here. Maybe I've already seen in class. X plus 13.1 equals negative 6.2. Now we have to remember that we're going to use opposite operations. So if a number is added, we're going to subtract it. In this case we have 13.1 being added to x, so we're going to undo that by subtracting 13.1 from both sides. And again, make sure that you show that on both sides of the equal sign. So we get x equals. Now here's where we have to do a little bit of thinking. We have two negative numbers basically being added together, as we know that that subtraction sign is really kind of like adding a negative. So we think about the sign before we actually do the math. In this case, it's going to be negative because I have a negative 6.2 and I'm adding to it a negative 13.1, making the number even more negative. So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget that. So really what I'm doing is adding, and I'm going to show that work over here, adding 6.2 to 13.1. Don't forget to line up those decimal points. 2 plus 1 is 3. 6 plus 3 is 9. Bring down the 1. So we end up with 19.3. But again, it's negative 19.3, and that's part of the reason that we thought about the sign before we actually did the work. Alrighty. Sometimes, get to the next slide here, sometimes we have subtraction. So here we have x minus 23.2 equals negative 42.1. And again, the opposite operation of subtraction is addition. So we're going to add 23.2 to both sides. There we go. So x is going to equal whatever these two added together are. Now again, we said before you actually do the math, stop and think about the sign. Which number has a greater absolute value? Since I have two different signs, which number has a greater absolute value, 42.1 or 23.2? Right, so we know that 42.1, the negative there, has a greater absolute value. So the answer is going to be negative. Now I know we talked about ninjas and all that, so if we think about it, there's more negative ninjas, right, than there are positives. And they're going to battle it out. So what that really means is we are subtracting. I know that shows addition. If we take a look right here, that I know it shows addition. So right there, there we go. But we are really in essence subtracting. So now again, remember this too. When you subtract, always put the larger absolute value on top. Doesn't make any sense to go the other direction. We didn't change the rules for that. And when you're subtracting, just like adding, line up your decimal points and line up all your digits. And again, we are subtracting. This one, we're going to have some borrowing here. So we're going to take this 2, turn into a 1, have 11 over here. 11 minus 2, right, we all know is 9. Bring down that decimal point, don't want to lose it. Got to borrow again, the 4 becomes a 3. 11 minus 3 is 8. And 3 minus 2 is 1. Now again, we said before, we thought about that answer, the sign of the answer, before we actually did the work, so we didn't forget it. It's not about you, but I'm going to forget stuff like that. So it's negative 18.9. So, look here. Things to remember. Use the opposite operation to undo. So if it's added, you subtract. If it's subtracted, you add. Think about and write down the sign of the answer before you do the work. You don't want to forget that. That's some of the points right there when you're taking a quiz or test. And if you are subtracting to find the answer, the larger absolute value goes on top. Looks like I misspelled the word value there. Alright, thank you very much, and have fun practicing some problems. And look at that. With the magic of electronics, it's fixed. It now says value. Thanks.